All right, now let's continue. The stability of South Sudan is likely to feature in the agenda of the East African Legislative Assembly, EALA, which begins sitting in Nairobi this afternoon. Now, two pieces of legislation, the EAC Gender Equality and Development Bill 2016, as well as the EAC Polythene Materials Control Bill 2016, are top on the agenda. However, lack of financing of the East African community by partner states is also likely to dominate discussions following concerns that the EAC organs cannot run programs because they are cash-strapped. Speaking ahead of the sitting, EALA Speaker Daniel Kidega also asked the South Sudan government and regional governments to push for peace in the region's youngest nation. All right, let's now link up with our reporter, Timothy Otieno, who's following up on this bit today. Thank you so much, Timothy, for joining us. So apart from those issues that we've mentioned, the gender equality, South Sudan is still a big issue, when it comes to EALA. Are we likely to hear more about their stand on this regional issue?
Well, definitely, yes, Betty, considering South Sudan is actually the newest member of the East Africa community. You can call it the region's last born. So of course that is most likely going to be one of the key debates that is going to be spoken about. Remember, South Sudan just joined officially the East Africa community in February this year. In fact, they still don't even have members who represent them at the community's legislative arm, that is the East Africa Legislative Assembly. They're still in the process of doing that and handing over instruments in that regard. So of course, that recent, the withdrawal of Kenyan troops is most likely going to be one of the things that will be discussed by the members there. But of course, the ultimate move, so to speak, of course, lies in the summit that constitutes all 5 heads of state, with the exception of South Sudan, who, of course, bear the greatest, let's say, responsibility, so to speak, in regards to what can be done for the situation in South Sudan. We saw Kenyan troops pull out, and indeed yesterday we saw the Speaker of the East Africa Legislative Assembly, Daniel Kidega, pronounce himself, indeed saying that it was unfortunate that Kenya had to withdraw troops because Kenya indeed has really nurtured South Sudan into its independence even before they became independent in 2011. So, but of course, the members, aside from discussing that, we also have to come up with candid and vivid plans of ensuring that the security situation in that country is restored. Indeed, that still remains a major challenge, especially when it comes to security. If you remember, Burundi, just a few months back, also faced a similar situation. And of course, the members there were really concerned with what was taking place in that regard. But of course, what the Assembly can do so much is to legislate and of course pass resolutions that they have to send to the summit, as I had stated. So the buck ultimately stops with the 5 heads of state who have to then ratify these legislations and actually effect them on the ground, Betty.
What other issues are we likely to hear them, talk about this time round, apart from, of course, the issues that you mentioned to do with the very important South Sudan crisis, so to speak?
Well, of course, Betty, key among them is what you had mentioned earlier, and of course that is the Gender Development Bill, as well as the Polythene Materials Control Bill. 2 key bills, of course, that are set to take place, and in particular, the Polythene Control Management Bill. This is the second time it's being brought up within the East Africa Legislative Assembly. During the second session back in 2011, the same bill was brought up, but it failed to sail through. Some of the members did not actually vote to pass this. This is a bill that seeks to ensure that the region's environment and, of course, in matters regards to polythene are regularized, and there is more government control on the use of polythene across all major partner states. This is the second time it's being brought, this time by a private member's bill. Conveniently so, by a member from Rwanda. Remember, Rwanda is one of the countries that has really gone ahead in managing its use of the polythene paper bags. In fact, that country up to now does not use any polythene material. But of course, they have to strike a balance between the interests of polythene producers and manufacturers, and this is why the bill failed the last time, because some of those who produce these polythenes, of course, were crying foul that their businesses would flop and their investments would not bear any fruit. So they have to strike a balance between getting the interests of the manufacturers on the table as well as the interests of the environment. But aside from that, there is also going to be a report by the Legal and Privileges Committee on harmonizing the laws and ensuring that each partner state adheres to the laws that this assembly passes. It's important to note that according to the Treaty of the Establishment of the East Africa Community, any legal document passed by the legislative arm of the East Africa Community reigns supreme over that country's laws and regulations. So basically, EALA rules and regulations are more important than the national country's rules and regulations. So this report is supposed to harmonize and see whether actually what is passed at the parliamentary stage at the regional assemblies actually implemented across all 5 member states. But of course, finally, there is also going to be an intra-parliamentary seminar that seeks to sensitize the agenda of the East Africa Community in each member state. And of course, this is going to be a session between Kenya's parliament and the regional assemblies parliament. And this happens on a regular basis. It's actually known as the Nanyuki seminar because it's begun in 2004 in Nanyuki. But of course, it's as part of the sensitization exercise that usually takes place when these sessions are held across all the major partner states. Betty.
Maybe finally, Timothy, President Uhuru Kenyatta is set to address the EALA next week. Do we know what points of discussion he's going to be engaging in?
Well, most likely the issue of South Sudan still will be one of the key talking points for the head of state. Of course, he's really come under sharp criticism, not only from members of the East Africa Legislative Organ through their speaker yesterday, but of course even from the opposition and the United Nations itself. This is, of course, a regional matter, and it bears great weight on President Uhuru Kenyatta, especially as the host of the regional assemblies, assembly this time round. He was expected to address the session today, traditionally, but because of various unavoidable circumstances, he will, of course, be addressing the assembly on next week, Tuesday. So maybe that may be one of the key things that he's going to be expected to talk about. Of course, we cannot preempt this. It really still remains at the discretion of the head of state. But of course, matters of integration, matters of trade, as well as matters of security, not only for Kenya, but for all partner states, and especially security in South Sudan and Burundi that have really faced hard times over the recent months, may be one of the things that the head of state will be addressing to the members of the East Africa Legislative Assembly and try to rally them together, because remember, these members are not only parliamentary representatives, they also play roles of diplomats to some extent. But of course, their unity should trickle down to the unity of all the member states and ensuring that security indeed is, the security of the region is paramount, Betty.
All right. Thank you so much, Timothy Otieno, there reporting. Thank you for your insights. All right. Now, the IEBC Special Selection Panel has shortlisted 36 persons for the position of IEBC commissioners. Those shortlisted include applicants for the position of chairman,